The shippers are coming. Hey there, folks. I'm now going to touch on a topic that I rarely talk about and almost never dedicate a video to. And that is a shipping pair. In this case, we are talking about Thasmin, which is the ship of Yasmin Khan, played by Mandip Gill, and the Doctor, the 13th Doctor specifically, played by Jodie Whittaker in Doctor Who. So, Thasmin was pretty much made canon in the most recent episode that aired at the time of recording, which was Eve of the Daleks.
Have you ever told her?
Told her what?
How you feel about her?
Is it that obvious?
Or at least it was confirmed as being canon for Yaz. We don't really have the Doctor's side of this yet, so we don't know if it's one-sided. Don't know if we're looking at a Martha and 10th Doctor situation again or not.
It's like when you fancy someone and they don't even know you exist. That's what it's like.
But the reason I want to talk about this, and again, something I rarely talk about, is there were some things that happened at Gallifrey 1, the conference I went to in Los Angeles, some things that were said by certain people that really got me thinking about it, and I want to talk about it. By the way, if you don't know about Gallifrey 1, there is my vlog recounting what it was like, because it was wonderful. But without getting into everything that went on there, there's two things that are relevant to this conversation that I want to have. Because I'm not really here to talk about whether or not I think Thasmin is a good idea or a bad idea. Because the honest truth is, I don't like the Doctor being romantically involved with companions. I never have. I didn't like it with 10 and Rose. I didn't like the unrequited version with Martha and 10. I didn't really like that Amy had the sexual crush on 11 for a while. One of the things I really appreciated about Capaldi's 12th Doctor was that that energy was not there anymore with his relationship with his companion. So I'm not super in favor of this, but again, that's more to do with my general demeanor as a grumpy bastard who does not really care for romantic subplots in anything. So I'm not here to litigate whether or not it's a good idea, it's a good ship, or whatever. I do want to talk about sort of how it's come about and look at it through the lens of the production and the writing and how it happened. Did it happen on purpose? Was it planned? When was it planned? And why does that matter? So, as I said, there's two main things we're going to be talking about. One happened at a panel I was actually personally at, and one happened at a panel that I didn't, but has been written up about, and I have sourcing on. So, the discussions that are going to be relevant here are from panels held by Matt Strevens, who is a producer on the current era of Doctor Who, and the one with Mandip Gill, which I was at. So, in both cases, the topic of this ship was brought up. And in the case of the Mandip Gill one, which is the one I was actually at, that was brought specifically up in terms of when did you know that this was going to happen? And in the case of the Matt Strevens panel, it was brought up in terms of what made you want to decide to do this. So, the answers each of them gave on their faces seem a little bit contradictory. Let me explain. So, what Matt Strevens said in regards to the entire concept of this ship was this. Jodie had brought it to set after the first season and said there's speculation out there and we hadn't really thought about it. But it became quite a big thing, and if you think about the history of Doctor Who since Russell brought it back, every companion story with the Doctor is a love story. Now, I'm just going to say really quick in regards to that second part of that, I heavily dispute what he's saying there. I will grant insofar as if you are putting platonic love on the table, because if you're telling me Bill was romantically in love with the 12th Doctor, you and I need to go have a conversation somewhere so I can pick your brain and figure out where you are getting any of that. But since he's putting it in the context of a romantic talk, I I just heavily disagree with that very statement. But I just need to say that so we can get it done and focus on the first part. And when I said things don't quite line up with what Mandip said, I don't have an exact quote from her because I didn't think to write it down at the time. But what she said when Riley Silverman asked her, when did you know that it was going to happen? Mandip Gill said, when I read it on the page, meaning in Eve of the Daleks. When she read that Dan asks Yaz about this, and Yaz confesses, that was the first time she knew it was happening.
I've never told anyone.
Now, on the surface, this would seem to be a little bit of a contradiction, right? Because we have, on the one hand, Matt Strevin saying, Jodie brought it to us after the first season, and so it was in our minds from that point on, which would have meant all through Series 12 and all through Flux, yet it wasn't addressed until after that. But Mandip Gill is saying, no, I did not know until Eve of the Daleks. So what's going on here? Well, a couple of things. The first is that I would not be surprised if in both cases there is a mild bit of exaggeration going on. I don't think either one is a liar, but I do think that when you're especially at something like a panel, you tweak stories so that they are better stories. They tell better and they hit better. That's just kind of a thing that happens whether you mean it to or not. So I would not be surprised if the impression that Matt Strevin's left of them sort of jumping on the idea once Jodie Whittaker brought it to them. And it's also worth saying that he said Mandip Gill was in favor of the idea. And for him to imply that like they were working on it ever since then, maybe that was the point at which the seed was planted, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were definitely writing them that way from there on out. But to imply that kind of makes a better story. As for Mandip Gill, I would not be very surprised to learn that she had an inclination, a thought, a hope that maybe they would do it prior to that reveal, but that she didn't know for certain until she read it. But she didn't imply that she had thought it would happen too much prior to that. So between those, I think that covers the gap in understanding. And so now let's talk about how this came about. And also it's worth pointing out, some people are like reporting this in weird ways. Like I saw some headlines that said Mandip Gill and Jodie Whittaker like fought to have it happen. I'm like, nothing either of them said implied that it was like they were pushing and were arguing and saying like, we need this to happen. Like that wording I've seen in a few places, like, no, that's just a complete mischaracterization of what I have heard and said and read. So drop that idea. But what appears to have happened is that Series 11, it was on nobody's minds. And then after that series aired, the fan community, some of them started talking about this idea, which all fan communities have shippers. They just do. So it's not exactly a novel thing that happened. But the fact that it got to the creators and that it was specifically brought to them by one of their stars, by Jodie Whittaker, and was sort of co-signed as an idea by Mandip Gill, that's sort of what makes it a little bit more unusual. Because, like, as I said, every fandom has its shippers. This stuff happens for every show, every season, all the time, forever. So the fact that the ship exists really isn't the thing. The thing is that it got brought to the creative team by some of their leads, which would have given it, in theory, more weight for them to actually think about doing it. We know Thasmin was not planned since Series 11. Everybody's story indicates that that was not going on. So that brings us to the question of whether or not it was planned from the start of Series 12 on. And if it was, why didn't you tell your actors that you were doing this? Because the thing that really jumped out to me about Mandip's statement was that it meant one of two things on its own, and then Matt Strevin's kind of narrowed it down. But at the time I heard that, I thought, well, that means one of two things. Either Chibnall decided to do that kind of out of nowhere and like hadn't really thought about it before, but then just decided to do it for whatever reason. Or it meant he'd been planning it, but for some reason thought it was a good idea to not tell the actors who had to portray that. And it appears to be that second one, based off what Matt Strevin said, with them kind of glomming onto the idea from Jodie Whittaker. Now, that doesn't mean that right from the start of Series 12 that the writers, when I say they in this case, I mean the writers, not also the actors, that they were planning to implement it definitely from there on out. But Mandip Gill did know that she was going to stick around for another series after Ryan and Graham left. So that definitely feels like it might have been building towards this thing. But then why wouldn't you tell your actors? That's the thing that strikes me as really, really strange. The only argument that I can think of that makes any degree of sense is that maybe they were afraid that she might spill the beans, like at a con or asked by a fan or something, which I'm not going to say is a totally invalid fear if that was at play. Mandip Gill herself at the panel was sort of adorably antsy about like, oh, what can I say? What can I say? But the thing is, like, she had an awareness. She was thinking very carefully about that and wasn't like just dropping things and then going, oh no, I shouldn't have said that. She was actually thinking about it as much as it was visible that she was kind of fretting about what she could or couldn't say. So I don't think this was a Tom Holland situation where, well, we know that they're going to spill it, so like we have to ensure that this actor knows as little as possible because they can't keep their mouth shut, which that's true with Tom Holland with Infinity War and Endgame. They had to show him the most bare bones scripts possible because the guy just lets stuff drop, which he freely admits, and he doesn't mean to, it just happens. But that doesn't feel like the situation that went on with Mandip Gill. So I'm not sure why she wasn't told. Which actually brings me back. I know I said Matt Strevins indicates that they had started writing it, but just didn't tell the actors. Just because they started thinking about the idea after Series 11 aired doesn't mean that's when they actually started writing it. And more to the point, Mandip Gill was not intentionally, deliberately playing Yaz to be that way. That's kind of the thing about the fact that she didn't know. So we're looking at one of two situations. Either the writers decided between Series 11 and 12, after finding out about this, that, yeah, we're going to do this, but then for some reason didn't tell their actors, or that planted the idea of, oh, maybe that's a thing to do later, and then watching the way in which Mandip Gill was playing the part made them think, okay, yeah, we should do that. And what I mean by that is, and this is another thing I've seen misreported, people have been writing and saying that, like, she played the Yasmin deliberately as, like, being in love with the Doctor, hoping that they'd make the ship real. That's not at all what she said. She did say that she made the decision to play Yaz with a sense of awe and wonder towards the Doctor. And she said that after she became aware of the ship, she was playing it in a way that if they ever went that direction, it could work that way. Not the same thing as deliberately playing it as love, but playing it in a way that if they ever pulled the trigger on it being love, the performance works for that. So we're in this bizarre situation where the actress and the fandom kind of manifested it to the writers, who then, after sitting on it for a bit, did decide to actually pull the trigger. Now, we've only got a couple of episodes left to find out where, if anywhere, this goes. There's been assurance that it is going to come up and be addressed in the upcoming Legend of the Sea Devils, and I really hope so, because as we near the end of the Chibnall era, it's been frustrating how many of the ideas, the big ideas, like them or not, have not actually yielded much story. The redestruction of Gallifrey has not really yielded any direct stories. The Timeless Child has barely come up again. And when it has, it's kind of been punted as if, well, we'll deal with that later. Like, you have almost no time left but you're not actively engaging with these ideas. And I would hate the idea, as much as I'm not a shipper, and I don't love the idea of the Doctor being in romantic relationships with the companions or even them being one-sided, as much as I don't like that idea, if you're going to have it, explore it. Do something with it. You're running out of time. And that, I feel, is indicative of Chibnall's era as a showrunner more than anything else. That these ideas, while I can't say definitively they aren't planned, the planning doesn't seem to actually extend out very far. Like the plan of what to do after this thing that you built up to. Like the timeless child happens, okay, so what now? Or, the lack of planning in the sense of this whole Thasmin thing and the fact that the actress didn't know. So, again, either you made a late decision to make it canon, even though you knew about it much sooner, or you just didn't tell her what she was going to be playing. Neither one is great, but I guess it's a difference between a sort of roughshod production style where there isn't nearly as much of a plan as you are implying and sort of letting the world think, which would be he just didn't tell her until he decided to firmly pull the trigger. Yeah, why not? That scenario indicates a production that was not nearly as planned as a lot of us thought, or that Chibnall himself implied. Like, even before the first episode aired, Chibnall was talking about his plan, how much he had planned, what a plan it was. But if that's the case, then we're looking at a situation where there was not that much planned, or the things that were planned were just kind of bullet points, and the plan didn't extend out very far, as far as well, how do we get there, and then what do we do with it once we got there? Or alternately, it was planned, and then that gives us a production where the plan itself and the way to go about executing it doesn't make a ton of sense. Because as someone who's done acting, you don't not tell your actors what emotions they're supposed to be playing. If you know what you're going to do, like, I understand not wanting to drop major plot points until that are going to happen later, but if you know what you're building towards, they kind of need to know when it's an emotional core of what they're doing. Which I think is why, for some people, when the whole thing happened in Eve of the Daleks, some people were very like, yes, I've been seeing this in the performance, and you have. Because as I said, Mandip Gill was playing it in a way that could be read that way, and she was doing it deliberately, even though, again, by her words, did not indicate to me that she specifically wanted it to be interpreted definitely that way. But there was something there. You weren't seeing nothing, at least not from Series 12 into Flux. But then there were others, and I'm not going to say I was completely in this camp, but I was closer to this camp. There were others who felt it came out of nowhere. And in a way, it did. We're in this bizarre, almost Schrodinger's relationship situation where it both was and wasn't planned, was and wasn't built up to. And it's just fascinating for me to talk about because it explains why there was such a split between people who definitely saw this coming and people who said this came out of nowhere, and they're both right in a way. What a strange situation. Again, no judgment on quality. I hope it goes somewhere. I hope they do something with it, but man, that's weird and interesting and fun to talk about. So, what are your thoughts? Do you think I've misread this situation and what did or didn't happen? Like, I'm throwing possibilities. I didn't say definitively what I think it was, but Do you think there's another possible read on this that isn't any of the ones I've given? What are your thoughts on this ship in general? What are you looking forward to in Legends of the Sea Devils? I'm honestly just kind of looking forward to the Sea Devils. I like the Sea Devils. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon is how I pay the bills. Any amount you're able to give does help me out immensely. Like, I was able to go out to Gallifrey 1 at all because of support on my Patreon. But even if you're not able to do that, there's other things to follow me on, other places on the internet, or just the like, share, and subscribe. They help as well. But don't worry about it too much. What I really want you to remember is that, shipper or not, you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. It's the end credits. Means I got to shout out some patrons. This month, it is Turok, Oliver B., Linda Walters, TT, Robin Powell, Fernobulax, The Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Dharma, Michael Doyle, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Casperl, Adam Lefty Taylor, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. Thanks so much for your support.